Looking back, I remember how all my family's summer barbecues went the same way. There'd be the initial bustle of uncles and aunts arriving with kids, clinking paper bags full of liquor and lopsided foil trays of macaroni and lasagna. First, drinks were poured, meat was thrown on the grill, and cackles followed light gossip in the crowded kitchen. We ate, parents drank, and as the afternoon progressed, all of the cousins overcame their shyness and darted around the open backyard. The older crowd took up residence in plastic-woven chairs with cups in hand. As they ventured deeper down into their drinks, so too did the light chatter from earlier in the afternoon, descending into more serious subjects. It wasn't until I had reached 11 or 12 years old that I began to recognize the reoccurrence of the name Carrie May, uttered from the semicircle of elders across the lawn. I asked my mom about who she was while driving home from a barbecue one afternoon. She said, "I'll tell you when you're older." I'm 15 now, and the grown-ups still fall into whispers when I pass by their drinking circle if Carrie May is the topic of conversation. Little do they know that I have done quite a bit of sleuthing on my own, through equal parts hearsay, courtesy of older cousins, and eavesdropping. I've since managed to piece together a general account of what happened to my distant cousin Carrie May and her family. After the fact, I can understand why my mother and all the other grown-ups chose to keep her story away from us kids. It's to this day the scariest thing I have ever, or never, heard. It happened in a little town in the North Shore of Massachusetts called Middleton, where Carrie May and her parents, my aunt and uncle, lived. Middleton was still pretty undeveloped in the mid-'80s. Young couples looking to start a family often opted for the paved and well-lit streets of neighboring Danvers or Salem over the pocked dirt roads of Middleton. But my Uncle Steve and Aunt Lena, Carrie May's parents, were known for being somewhat bohemian. They were both painters who relished in the unfettered wilderness that the small wooded town had to offer. The family fit in well there. Carrie May grew up surrounded by the likes of artists, painters, and eccentrics who called that small stretch of forest home. On the evening that Carrie May went missing, her family was visiting a public patch of garden rented by one of her father's friends. This particular field was divided into dozens of small plots where the town's citizens could grow anything from cucumbers to black-eyed Susans. Their friend's plot bordered the forest surrounding the field. While the parents sat in rickety chairs among the watermelons, the kids darted in and out of the trees and played hide-and-seek. At one point in the evening, the other kids in the group came back to their parents saying that they couldn't find Carrie May. They'd been playing a game of hide-and-seek, and even though the game had been over for 20 minutes, Carrie May was still nowhere to be seen. At first, my aunt and uncle weren't that alarmed. They yelled her name from where they sat, expecting her to come running from the woods once she heard the voices. Carrie May was a playful and imaginative girl, but she was always well-behaved. That's why my Uncle Stephen and Aunt Lena started to get worried after only a few minutes of getting no answer from their calls into the woods. As the sun began to set, flashlights were retrieved from cars, and the grown-ups in the group fanned out into the surrounding woods to search for Carrie May. They called her name until 9 o'clock or so. After that, they called the cops. Days went by. Weeks. All the while, police officers and volunteers from Middleton and neighboring towns combed the woods, going miles into the New England forest. Yet despite the fervor of the search, not so much as a shoelace was recovered. After 1 month of flyers, false tips, and whirs of helicopter blades and television appearances, my aunt and uncle first began to consider the possibility that they would never see Carrie May again. But then, something extraordinary happened. Contrary to all statistics for missing children, kidnappings, and the rule of the first 48 hours. Carrie May was found. Or, more accurately, she just showed up. One day, roughly 5 weeks after her disappearance, she emerged, naked, bruised, and scratched from the woods at the exact spot that she had entered from. No one was at the gardening plot at the time, as it was 5 o'clock in the morning. She walked barefoot across the misty field and down the country road into town. Angus MacLeod, a fry cook at N&J Donuts, was the first one to spot her. He called the police, who picked her up and brought her to the station. By 7:30, there had been a tearful reunion between Carrie May, Uncle Stephen, and Aunt Lena. By 9, the news of Carrie May's return had trickled through the neighborhood and was spilling over into the neighboring towns. 12 o'clock saw the long driveway to their home jammed with vans from every newspaper and television station on the North Shore, and by dinner time, all of Essex County was in celebration for the darling 13-year-old who had finally come home. "It was like a bad dream," Aunt Lena whimpered into a Channel 5 microphone. "A bad dream that I couldn't wake up from, but today I woke up." And so it seemed to that small pocket of Massachusetts in the dog days of 1985, like some great nightmare had hovered for a spell over their town only to move on, saving its worst for another time in another place. The story of Carrie May was not so simple and joyous as all the headlines and news anchors led the country's residents to believe, however. While vast coverage was devoted to Carrie May's initial reappearance, virtually no attention was given to the events which ensued weeks later, after all the fanfare had died down. By the time Carrie May had countless interviews with investigators and child psychiatrists regarding her disappearance, each of these efforts to discover what actually happened was discouraged, however, by Carrie May's persistent reply, "I don't remember anything." Making no headway, the professionals backed off but encouraged my Aunt Lena and Uncle Stephen to monitor Carrie May carefully for any unusual behavior. Yeah, was their typical bohemian reply. They were just happy to have their daughter back. Carrie May was home. What was there to worry about? And indeed, for the first few weeks after Carrie May's return, there did seem to be little need for concern. Back at home in her own room, Carrie May quickly slid back into the old grooves of life as usual. She strung and beaded another dream catcher, feverishly chopped up fashion magazines for a new collage, played Carole King's Tapestry until the needle was shot, and ate tomato and mayonnaise sandwiches by the stack, with a side of cherry Coke, of course. My Uncle Stephen hired a few extra hands at his house painting company so that he could take some time off. The three of them made a trip up to Kenobi Lake Park, where Carrie May rode the Cannonball roller coaster a total of 8 times in 2 hours, breaking her own record. Within a 2-week period, they ate lobster rolls and French fries at the Clam Box 3 times, and they caught so many fireflies in the evenings that Aunt Lena guessed they could light Fenway Park with them. It truly seemed that life had returned to normal for the small family. Unfortunately, for Carrie May, Uncle Stephen, and Aunt Lena, those 2 happy weeks would prove to be no more than the eye of the storm. Something truly sinister lay on the horizon, and it came for a visit about 3 weeks after Carrie May's return. On the night it happened, Carrie May woke her parents up, saying that she couldn't sleep because of a noise in her bedroom. When asked what it sounded like, she said it was a sort of rubbing or grinding. My aunt and uncle went to her room, switching on the light, checking the corners and closet. They listened, too, but after a minute of hearing and seeing nothing out of the ordinary, they told Carrie May that she could sleep with them that night. They'd take a closer look at things in the morning. So all 3 of them went to bed and were soon asleep. In the very early morning, my Aunt Lena woke up to go to the bathroom. It was down the hall on the left, just past Carrie Mae's room, and after using the toilet, she was passing Carrie Mae's room when something caught her eye at the window. From the door, she could see Carrie Mae's window, which was open, as it had been earlier that night. Nothing unusual there. What was unusual, what made my aunt's blood suddenly run cold, was the flap of torn screen hanging down into the room. Slowly, she padded past the threshold, across the floorboards over to the window. Reaching down and picking up the flap of screen, she noticed that the edges were gnarled and frayed, as if it had been sawed through with a blunt instrument. With a chill, she realized that this was the sound that Carrie Mae had heard, the cutting of the screen. As she examined it, she suddenly noticed something long and dark lying on the floor beneath the window. Picking it up, she noted its lightness, how it was smooth on one side but curled and grimy on the other. One end of it was jagged, as if it had broken off of something. The other was a fine point, with a sharp edge running down one side. A bone, she thought. Looking back and forth from the object to the window screen, she had felt the material before, felt it every day of her life. No, not a bone. It was then that she came to the sickening realization of what had been used to open the screen that she heard it. A wet, guttural growl. She turned quickly to her left, expecting to find an animal. What she saw instead made the room spin. There in the corner, lit partially by moonlight, stood a woman. But not just any woman. It was the most horrifying creature, animal or man, she had ever seen. The mere sight of it made her sick with revulsion and terror. It was completely emaciated. The filthy floral dress hung loosely from its shoulders. Its neck barely looked able to support the large head covered by a great, wild, and greasy nest of black hair. Strands shot in rays all around its skeletal face. Its wide, pale eyes, hid back in two caves within the skull, looked drugged, frantic, desperate, and even a bit mirthful. They hung above a thin, carved sliver of a mouth, which seemed both to smirk and scowl, revealing flashes of black, rotten teeth. Bloody scratches and splotches of mud, dirt, and filth speckled its twig-like arms. It had no shoes on. Both feet were black with earth and brown claw-like toenails dug into the floor where it stood. The nails on its hands were easily the length of the fingers from which they grew. In a fitting observation, they reminded Aunt Lena of the sloths she had once seen at the zoo. 9 great black curls hung from the 10 grimy fingers. The 10th, of course, Aunt Lena held in her own hand. It had belonged to the left index. Upon seeing the cracked stump where it had once been, she dropped it to the floor. The thing raised its right arm and pointed a dagger nail at Carrie Mae's empty bed. It growled again, only this time Aunt Lena realized it wasn't a growl at all. It was a word. Girl. Where's the girl? As it spoke, drool dribbled from its cracked lips, from between jagged black teeth. Strings of it glistened in the moonlight and pooled onto the ends of its massive toenails. Some of it hung from the dark, slender chin before stringing down onto the front of its dress. While watching the spittle roll down past the bumps of its tiny breasts, Aunt Lena came to another horrifying realization. She had seen that pattern before. Purple flower, yellow flower, purple flower, yellow flower. TJ Maxx back-to-school sale. Dear God, I bought that dress. That's Carrie Mae's dress. The thing lurched forward now with something clutched in its left hand. Something that had been hidden in the darkness. A sack, a giant, coarse, ancient-looking burlap sack with its wide, dark mouth gaping open, and the creature clicked forward on its gnarled toenails, the great sack hissing across the floorboards at its side. As it advanced, the mouth tightened from a bitter scowl into a wide black grin, a grin denoting an epiphany. "You'll do," it gargled, and practically giggled as it motioned with its free hand toward the open sack. "Get in, get in, get in." Its eyes went wide, wider than any eyes Aunt Lena had seen before, its wet black mouth open and shut in a gnashing grin as it began to make clumsy swipes at my aunt with its right hand. "You'll do. Get in," it barked, all in one garbled word. "You'll do, get in." At this point, Aunt Lena found her vocal cords, which, up until that point, had been stifled with pure terror. Her survival instincts loosened the screams that had been mounted in her throat since seeing that flap of torn screen. She screamed with all the delirium and abandon of a creature caught in the claws of death. Backed up against the wall behind her, she quickly scuttled sideways towards the doorway and dashed, screeching down the hall towards her bedroom. My Uncle Stephen was already out of bed. He followed my aunt's shaking finger back towards Carrie Mae's bedroom, only now to find gauzy curtains fluttering in the wind. At the window, he could just make out a thin, dark form retreating to the forest's edge. Dawn saw many of the same officers who had calmed and questioned Carrie Mae 3 weeks before, combing the property. Kicking through tall grass and brush with flashlights, not far from where Uncle Stephen had seen it enter the woods. Officers found what looked like a rudimentary campsite. The bones and viscera of squirrels sat in a pile by a leaf pine needle mattress. A dugout latrine sat 10 paces from the bed, and under a log, near the squirrel remains, officers recovered soggy, moldering newspapers chronicling the return of Carrie Mae. The entire site had a direct view of Carrie Mae's bedroom window. It was quickly surmised by everyone at the scene that the woman had camped out in the woods near the house for some time before attempting to abduct Carrie Mae. Maybe a week, maybe more. Police obtained a sketch of the woman based off of my Aunt Lena's account of that night. It was distributed throughout the county's police departments. The sketch was also used in one final interview with Carrie Mae following the incident at the house. Carrie Mae, who had been surprisingly calm during the whole event, took one look at the sketch of the woman and began to shake uncontrollably. She had a fit, bordering on epileptic, where in the office of the Middleton police chief, while screaming, she attempted to rip off her own skin with her fingernails, screeching, "Like this." She did it like this. A team of psychiatrists later theorized that Carrie Mae's previous abduction had been so traumatic that she had repressed it, leaving no conscious memory of her time in the woods. Upon seeing a portrait of her abductor, however, those memories all came rushing back, overloading her conscious mind, frying it with madness. She left the police department that day on a stretcher, her hands and feet bound by leather straps. Rumor has it that she began to laugh uncontrollably in the ambulance on the way to the hospital. She's lived at McLean Psychiatric Hospital in Belmont, Massachusetts ever since. The North Shore Snatcher, as she came to be called in the local folklore, was never found. It's 2016 now, and for all I know, she's dead. Or perhaps she's moved on to woods in some other county, some other state. Who knows? The truth is, she doesn't even need to be alive or present to exist. Like something as traumatic as a shark attack or a plane crash, The memory of what happened to Carrie Mae and her family echoes down the years, so that even decades later, the fear remains fresh. So odd and disturbing was the event that the old folks are still left glued to their chairs at summer barbecues, brooding over their drinks and trying to piece it all together. All the while, they keep a watchful eye on that border where the lawn ends and the woods begin. Occasionally, a young cousin will dash in amongst the trees, only to hear behind them, "Hey, get out of there!" from their parents. "You don't know what's in there." The little culprit will emerge from the bushes, stomping its feet in protest and whining, "Why not? There's no poison ivy around here." But by that point, the parents looking past the child, into the gloom beyond the birches. More to themselves than anyone else. They'll mutter, "It ain't poison ivy I'm worried about." Hey guys, do you know I made a video game? So, Megabyte Games is me and General Drowned, and we're trying to make a couple video games together. If you guys would like to see what games those are, check out Midnight Myths. It's on my itch.io, MrCreepyPasta.itch.io. If you want to download the game, it's free, and you can check it out for yourself and let me know what you think. As always, I want to give a very big thank you to everybody out there on patreon.com/MrCreepyPasta. You guys are honestly a lifesaver when it comes down to this. I feel like a lot of stresses in my life kind of have been leading me to pulling my hair out, but you guys giving me support has been immense for me. So I want to say a big thank you to everybody that's on there, even if you can only donate $1. Hey, you guys are keeping me alive at this point. So a very, very big thank you to everybody there, and to especially Jordan Humble, Diana Kraus, King Crab, Calcifer420, Veronica Lynn Lopez, Marlon Chavez, Azazel66603, Ethan Leon, Polaris Prospect X, Blake Rattler, Viceroy Scorn, Samara Lynn, Disciple, SullyMan, Brandon Mendoza, BrimstonePandemonium, Caltuna, William Wellington, Scruffy the Janitor, Brenna Crow, LaQueda Canizales, Smiley the Psychotic, Dante Kinkade, SimbasBloodyMojo, CursepoxPrimarch, M, Jettis Pet, Clonable, J Kearns, Mike, himbojerry, Crusader Chocobo, Remember the Sun, Estebean, Hour Minute Second Time, Seclude, Salty Surprise, Red Shadowcat, Turtleman, Mr. Marcus Blitz, Voice of Sand, Phycomel, Melted Lake, Tully Sue, Croconut 509, Stricken, Freddy Krueger, Hades Nephew, Tommy Walters, Acid System, Sky Harbor, Nico Kaio, Tristan Pelton, Ball Arms the Rat, The Ginger Bros, Daniel Polson, and Corey Kinchin. To all of you guys there, everybody who's down in the description, and everybody who can just give $1, I want to say thank you to you guys. And if you would like to join this list in the description, head over to patreon.com/MrCreepy. And if you would like to join this list in the description, sweet dreams.